So, how bad were the expansion 1962 New York Mets? Well, pretty bad. It took the Chicago White Sox bad season this year to match their total losses in a campaign. They finished the year 40 and 120 for a 25% win percentage. Now, playing at the Polo Ground under owner Joan Payson and general manager George Weiss, the Casey Stengel led a ragtag group of also rans and old veterans and some up-and-coming players to basically have an inept season. Were they that bad? Yes, but they became hometown heroes because every time they won, there was a celebration. Now, the Mets in the National League allow the NL to return to New York City for the first time in 57 since New York moved to San Francisco. They went 40-120 and finished last in the National League, 6.5 games behind the NL champion, ironically, the Giants, who had once called New York home. The Mets were the latest team to be 160-plus games behind the division before the 2018 Baltimore Orioles finished 61 games behind World Series champion Boston. The Mets' 120 losses are the most by any MLB team in one season since the 1899 Cleveland Spiders, who went 20-134. No team would match this mark until the 2024 Chicago White Sox, 62 years later. Get this, the Mets starting pitchers also recorded a new major league low of just 24 wins all season. 17 wins in relief on only 23 wins. We'll get that in a second. The team lost its first game 11-4 to the Cardinals on April 11th. It went on to lose its first 9 games, having repaired the record to 12-19 on May 20th after sweeping a doubleheader against the Braves. The Mets lost their next 17 contests. They also lost 11 straight from July 15 to 26 and 13 straight from August 9th to 21st. Their longest winning streak of the season was 3. Now, the Mets were managed by former New York Yankee manager Casey Stengel and played their home games at the Polo Grounds, which was their temporary home while Shea Stadium was being built in Queens. They remain infamous for their ineptitude of one of the worst teams in MLB history. Their team batting average, team earned run average, and team fielding percentage were all the worst in the major leagues that season. Despite the team's attendance, fans came out in droves. Their 62 season attendance of 922,000 was good enough for a 6th in the National League. The season was eventually chronicled in Jimmy Broslin's humorous best-selling 1963 book, Can't Anybody Here Play This Game? The title came from a remark made by manager Casey Stengel, expressing a frustration over his team's continuously poor play. So no matter what he tried to do during the season, nothing was working. Now he threw numerous players in the mix, but the key for the Mets that year was when they traded a player to be named later to cash to the Braves for Frank Thomas and a player to be named later. The deal was completed on May 21st, 62, when the Mets sent Gus Bell to the Braves, and the Braves sent Rick Hersher to the Mets. Now, expansion draft was quite interesting. They had a whole bunch of older players in cast-off, including Craig Anderson, Gus Bell, Chris Cannizzaro, a catcher, very, very good player from the Cardinals, the great Choo-Choo Coleman, Roger Craig from the Dodgers. Maybe that was a mistake. We'll get that in a second. Of course, Gil Hodges, who had played with the Dodgers for a number of years, was taken. And he also had Hobie Landrick, Felix Mantilla, and, of course, Don Zimmer. Now, at the time, they had the minor league affiliates. The Mets and Colts were established again October 7, 60, giving them time to acquire minor league professional players, sign amateur free agents, and because there was no first-year MLB draft until 65, and enter into working agreements with minor league affiliates during the 61 season. New York had formal working agreements with the Mobile AA Bears, the Raleigh Capitals, and the Class D Lexington Indians. Now, as the expansion team, the Mets were not expected to do well. They finished last in the NL and also finished 24 games behind the expansion brethren, the Colt 45s. Only one division, the Colts finished 64-96, and of course the Mets 40-120. It wasn't a full season for the Mets, and of course the Giants and Dodgers played a playoff series. Now, the first game in team history was played at the Road at Busch in St. Louis on Wednesday, April 11th. The Mets fell behind 2-0 and 5-2 early, then narrowed the deficit to 1 run, but ultimately lost to the Cardinals 11-4. Former Brooklyn Dodgers Hodges and Charlie Neal homered for the Mets, whose home opener at New York's Polo Grounds would wait till their second ever official game on Friday, April 13, 62. Opening day lineup included Richie Ashburn, Felix Mantilla, Charlie Neal, Frank Thomas in cleanup, Gus Bell, Gil Hodges, Don Zimmer, Hobie Landreth, and of course Roger Craig, which would become tough. Now, New York had a very interesting campaign, ladies and gentlemen. They finished 9-9 against Chicago, but only 2-16 against the Dodgers and 2-16 against the Pirates, who were the class of the league that year. Now, they were 5-13 against Cincinnati, 3-13-1 against Houston, 6-12 against Milwaukee, 4-14 against the Phillies, 4-14 against San Francisco, and 5-13 against St. Louis. Now, big acquirers that year, Bob Miller and Cliff Cook were sent to the Reds. Acquired by the Mets for Don Zimmer in the Reds, and Marvelous Marv Thornberry, which would be a legendary through the years. He was sold by the Orioles to the Mets. Now, Hobie Landreth was eventually sold to the Orioles, and Ed Kranepool, who became a Mets legend through the years, was signed as an amateur free agent by the Mets. Now, the pitch that year was a very interesting campaign, ladies and gentlemen. They had technically seven pitchers. Chris Cannizzaro, Harry Cheedy, Choo Choo Coleman, Joe Ginsberg, Hobie Landreth, Joe Pignatano, and Sammy Taylor. And a very, very interesting season at the plate. Now, Cannizzaro, despite playing 133 at-bats, only had 9 RBIs. Marvelous Marv Thornberry had 16 homers and 49 RBIs, much to the delight of his followers. Charlie Neal with 11.58, Mantilla 11.59, Elio Chacon, shortstop, 2 homers, 27 RBIs. But get this, Frank Thomas, 152 hits, 34 home runs, 94 RBIs, the class of the team. Now, Jim Hickman went 13.60, 46, and Joe Christopher, 6 home runs, 32 RBIs. Now, of the veteran and talented bench players or utility players, Richie Ashburn got 119 hits, 7 home runs, 28 RBIs. Gil Hodges had a strong campaign, 9 homers, 17 RBIs, and only 127 at-bats, batting .252. Now, the reason why Gus Bell wasn't really in their plans, he only batted 114, 101 at-bats. Now, Joe Pignatano, Sammy Drake, Rick Hersher, Hobie Landreth, Jim Marshall, Bob Smith, John Demeritte. Kranepool, in limited play, had 1 hit and 6 at-bats. Now, the starting pitchers, ladies and gentlemen. Roger Craig, God bless him, 42 starts, 10 wins, 24 losses, 233 innings pitched, 4.51 ERA, 118 strikeouts. Al Jackson went 8-20, and Jay Hook, good name for a pitcher, get the hook, 8-19. Now, Bob Miller went 1-12, while Craig Anderson saved 4 games, but went a ludicrous 3-17. Now, relief pitchers, there was a player on the team, ladies and gentlemen, if you can believe that, had a winning record. Now, who do you think it was? Ken McKenzie ended up 5-4 with 1 save, with a 4.95 ERA. Now, probably one of the more interesting players to ever play for the Mets was Vinegar Ben Mizell, playing 17 games, going 0-2 with a 7.34 ERA, with only 15 strikeouts and 38 innings pitched. So, again, vinegar can be sour. This is what we have here. Now, they were leaders in numerous categories that year, but not in a good way. Richie Ashburn was third in NL in bases on balls, always had a good eye. Roger Craig was the league leader in losses with 24, second in home runs allowed with 35, and third in earned runs allowed with 117. Jay Hook, again a great name for a pitcher, was fourth in earned runs allowed with 115, and fourth in NL home runs allowed with 31. Of course, Al Jackson was number 2 with losses. Now, the farm system for 62 was rejigged. Syracuse Chiefs of the IL, managed by Frank Verde and Johnny Vandermeer, was their key minor league. The Santa Barbara Rancheros, the California League, C-level. And there was 2 D-level teams, the Quincy Jets and the Auburn Mets of the Midwest and New York Penn League. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's many, many books and stories written about the 62 Mets. Like I said, they were could it be considered in today's league, he probably wouldn't have won a game, but Frank Thomas was the only player that the team's opponents needed to stop. But fielding was terrible, but the fans, again, loved Marvelous Marv. They liked Frank Thomas. because Thomas would, the big imposing plate. I don't think if Frank Thomas would have been there, he wouldn't have won 40 games, because most of the contests where he won by a major amount, Thomas was, the guy that pulled it. But Roger Craig, again, a very, very respected coach and manager later on, to lose 24 games, I mean, he could have easily lost 30, but like I said, he was a decent pitcher. But if you look at a team in a very strong National League, because you had Pittsburgh, you had the Dodgers, you had the Giants. I mean, this was the time of the Alous and Willie Mays and Hank Aaron, Milwaukee Braves. It was a rough go. But ladies and gentlemen, the Miracle Mets of 69 and the Miracle Mets 2 of 73, to see them go from 62 to World Series champions 7 years later and World Series finalists 11 years later, the dedication was there. And the key, of course, was the late, great Ed Kranepool. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're doing here, we're a New York Mets podcast. And no disrespect to Chicago White Sox. Their 120 losses this year, a lot of them were competitive. They're not as bad as the Mets, because the expansion teams get bad. Look at the Ottawa Senators. But to make comparisons of the 2024 White Sox to the Mets in 62, Chicago, it's been a strong year in the AL for batting, Aaron Judge and others. So, anyway, I don't consider that the worst team of all time, but the Mets pretty well are the worst, because the Spiders, were playing on a road for most of the season. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're doing here, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share. As we like to say in Northern New Brunswick, swing for the fences. Have a good one. Bye.